Our next topic is types of weathering. Weathering is three types: mechanical weathering, chemical weathering and biological weathering. Okay, so what is mechanical weathering? That it is responsible for the disintegration of rock by the element of weather such as heat, frost, wind, plants, man and an animal. So there have not any kind of chemical composition, and by some mechanical activity, because due to change of heat, frost, wind, plants, man and animals, that the weathering is occurred. And mechanical weathering does not change the composition of the rock because there have not any kind of chemical reaction. It depends on the following factors: that extremes of temperature, nature of rocks, structure of rocks, frost, wind and slope of land. These are the factors of mechanical weathering. Extreme of temperature: the sandy, arid and semi-arid regions are heated intensely during the day and lose heat rapidly in the night. So there have a huge difference of temperature in day and night, and hence the diurnal range of temperature is very high. That means in a day the range of temperature, that highest and lowest, there have a big gap, and this cause expansion of the rocks during the day and contraction during the night. And due to this temperature variation, what happened, that in a day that the rocks are expanded, and in the time of night that rocks are constructed. So in this way, by this expansion and contraction, that rocks are break down. Okay, this cause rocks to disintegrate and split. Exfoliation is what? That the change in temperature during summer and winter, and in case of arid region during the day and night, cause expansion and contraction in the rock surface, and this cause the rock to break up or peel off. Okay, they are actually in the change of temperature, the rocks are actually broke down as a peel off. That means like a onions peel. Okay, and rectangular rock blocks are thus gradually rounded by the splitting away of sharp corners, and this process is called exfoliation. So this is actually uh, this is actually happened like a onion peel off. Okay, nature of rock. So nature of rock refer to the composition of rocks, and some rocks may be hard and some soft. So that these are the factors. That first factor was extreme of temperature. Next is nature of rocks. That nature of rocks refer to the composition of rocks, and some rocks may be hard and some soft. So the rocks, it may be hard or it may be soft, and some may be soluble and some insoluble. So some rocks it can easily solute in any kind of liquid material, and some rocks are insoluble in nature, and hence mechanical weathering takes place in the softer or soluble rocks more easily than in the hard and insoluble rocks. So these are suitable for the insoluble rocks, and in case of sandy soil of desert, it is picked up by wind more easily, while clay or loam cannot be lifted by air easily. Okay, and next is structure of rocks. The texture or arrangement of rocks also affect the process of weathering. So structure of rock is also one factor. That vertically arranged layers of rocks are more susceptible to weathering as compared to horizontal arranged layer, as air, water, snow and frost enter through gaps. So the structure of rocks also depend that these also depends that how much weathering will be happened there. Okay, once the water or frost enters the rocks, it starts with its erosive action and breaks them into some pieces. Next is frost. Frost is the most common agent of weathering in the temperate regions, and when water enters the rocks and turns into ice, its volume increases, and during the day by the ice thaws and the water enters deep into rocks. When temperature drops during the night, the water again freezes, widening the cracks. This repeated freezing and thawing results in the breaking up of rocks. Okay, so by this frost activity, that some cracks are occurred at first in the rocks, and they actually extended and they break down the rocks. Next is slope of lands. Weathering also depends on the gradient of slope, and the steep slope of the rock are eroded more rapidly by the agent of weathering as compared to gentle slopes. Okay, so slope also one factor of the weathering. And next come to the chemical weathering. That chemical weathering involves the breaking down of rocks by altering or dissolving the rock material due to chemical action or change. So there the chemical action is very important, and chemically the weathering is happened. It is more common in hot and humid regions, and it is a slow process of as compared to mechanical weathering. So it is more common in hot and humid region. Okay, and this is a slow process compared to the mechanical weathering. And the gradual decomposition of rocks takes place due to exposure to air water. Example, water containing oxygen from the air may change iron in the rocks or to iron oxide or iron compounds. The process of chemical weathering is governed by the following factors. So there have four types of chemical weathering: oxidation, carbonation, hydration and solution. So these are the four types of chemical weathering. First come into oxidation. What is oxidation? When the oxygen in the air and water reacts with the mineral in the rocks, this is called as oxidation. Example, most rocks contain a certain amount of iron which on coming into contact with air and water containing oxygen and changes into iron oxide. They changes into iron oxide, and iron oxide crumbles easily and is far more easily eroded than original iron. And as it is removed, the rocks are weakened and thus decomposed. Oxidation not only changes the composition of rock mineral, but also it appears and produce brownish crust or rust. Okay, we can see the rust in any kind of iron component. Okay, so like this way the oxidation do the rusting activity in some minerals or metals. Okay, and the soil thus formed are reddish brown in color like red soil. So by this oxidation weathering, that the rocks are actually chemically changed. Okay, and they also helped to form the soil. And the hydration, the chemical reaction of water with minerals changes the proportion and composition of rocks and minerals. Like example, feldspar to silicate of aluminium absorbs water and becomes a mass of clay or kaolin. Okay, so the hydration weathering is totally based on the water, the activity or the effectiveness of water. Next is carbonation, is the reaction of carbonic acid on the mineral. So this is the another kind of weathering where the carbonic acid do the change of rocks, and rainwater then mixed with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere forms a weak solution of carbonic acid, and it acts on rocks containing limestone and chalk. Solution is what? That the rainwater when reacts with the mineral present in the rocks dissolve them, and when it sifts below the ground through joint and gaps and crevices, and it further dissolves the soluble mineral by forming a solution and separates the insoluble mineral. So by the solution process, what some soluble materials or the rocks, they actually solute in the water and they totally change the formation of rock. Next is biological weathering. This is another kind of weathering, and biotic factors like plants and animals do the weathering activity. Like the plants, that the roots of the plants grow into the cracks and crevices in search of water or nourishment, and as they grow they exert great pressure on the rocks and break them. So like this picture, that the roots of the trees, they actually broke down the rock structure. And sometimes the root of plants produce carbonic acid, and sometimes they also produce some carbonic acid. Next is by the hand of animals, that burrowing animals also cause breakup of rocks, and they cause loosening of weakening of the rocks and expose them to the other agent of weathering. So by this way, that that animals also do the weathering activity by the burrowing in a rock. Okay. And human activities, their activities such as road construction work, mining, farming, deforestation cause weathering and disintegration of rocks. So these are also some activities of weathering, that mining, farming, deforestation, these things. Now What are the effects of weathering? The decomposition and disintegration of rocks brings about a lot of changes on the earth's surface, and its effects are both constructive as well as destructive. So this change of weathering, they also bring us some positive changes and some negative changes. So constructive effects are that weathering leads to soil formation, which is required for agriculture. So soil are formed due to weathering activity, and in this way the agriculture activity also done properly, and the weathering process leads to exposure of new materials which are easily erodible, and chemical weathering gives us to many new minerals having economic value. So they also give us some new minerals. And weathering may provide building materials like cement and limestone. So weathering also provide us the building materials like cement and limestone. And the some destructive effects, that mechanical weathering may cause extensive soil erosion. So in the time of weathering, the soil are eroded too much, and which may affect agriculture, and in this way the agriculture fields fertility is actually reduced, and landslide may cause havoc in mountainous areas. And due to this weathering, that landslides are occurred in some mountain region, and these are create some barrier in the transportation activities. And chemical weathering may dissolve the soluble components of the soil, and this may cause the soil to become infertile and many affect farming activities. And in this way, with the help of landslide, that the weathering, the destructive effect of weathering, and in this way the transport systems are actually totally damaged. And next is deforestation. By the activity of the deforestation, that all trees are actually cut it out. Okay, so these kinds of negative effects also have in the weathering activity. Okay.